Welcome back to part 30 of the OC story, where you guys vote and comment for things and I improvise my way through a story. I've started to drop some breadcrumbs now. I have got a few ideas of things I want to happen in the future. This story is rapidly taking a shape, which is very interesting. So thank you for sticking with me, and I think we'll be wrapping it up in the next 10 to 20 episodes or so. Alright, let's dive in. Erasmus and Tinny look to each other, and then, without uttering a single word, they take off running down the street. They follow as fast and as close as they can, seeing Darrow being dragged down, round corners, and then he disappears into the darkness, into the shadows, into that place that assassins know oh too well. The darkness, the shadows, that void almost, walking the world unseen and unnoticed. And now, their friend is gone. Erasmus is trying hard not to panic as they tear after the last place they saw Darrow's eyes. They peer into the shadows of the street, but they see nothing. The assassin and the others who kidnapped him are gone. They stop and stand, panting for a moment, staring around, checking every corner, looking around every street. They run down several dead ends, then come back upon themselves. Where can those people have gone? And where have they taken Darrow? They still don't speak to each other as they frantically run and run and run. And then Erasmus slows to a stop and jogs back a few steps, peering up at the sign for the blacksmith's forge. It is grungy, run down and dark, but still active, even this late at night, or rather early in the morning. There is smoke coming out of the chimney, and hammering coming from the inside, metal upon metal, striking again. The door is ajar. Erasmus recognized it at once, and an idea strikes him. "Tinny!" he calls down the street, and the girl tiptoes her way over to him, soft on her ballet slippers. "What is it?" she asks. "I know this place. Me and Darrow came here once. It takes you down to..." "The Black Market, yes! I haven't been yet, but I really want to go." Somehow, the knowledge that Tinny knew this already was not surprising. "I suppose it would be entirely pointless to ask you to go home where it is safe." "Completely pointless, Uncle Erasmus. So we're going in?" "Yes, but there is something I have to say first. Let me remember." "What, like a password?" "Yes. They will only let you down into the Black Market if you say the right thing. Let me remember." And Erasmus got lost in thought for a moment, remembering as he had followed Darrow, they had gone inside and then... "I've got it. Come on, Tinny, let's go." The door creaked as they opened it and stepped carefully inside. They were hit smack immediately with a rush of warmth from all the blazing fires, the buckets full of metal cooling down that was still steaming, and there were several workers hammering away, writing things down and striding around. Erasmus straightened his back and walked up to one with a deliberate air. He tried very hard not to show the panic on his face. "Hello, we are heading south side. Is the road open?" he asked, not blinking once. For a moment, as the man continued hammering the sword in his hands, Erasmus panicked that he remembered it wrong, said the wrong thing. But then the blacksmith grunted, glancing at Erasmus and then back to his own equipment, as he answered, "Nah, road's closed for an hour. Special VIP transport. Don't want to be followed. You understand, of course. Welcome to waiting here, just don't cause no fuss." Erasmus did blink then, but thankfully no one was watching as his poise fell. "Right. Thank you. We'll just, we'll wait over here." He motioned to Tinny, and they both sat on a low bench in the far corner of the shop, waiting and waiting. It was quite possibly the longest hour of the prince's life, as he sat staring, unable to move, unable to do anything. unable to follow who he desperately hoped and believed to be Darrow and his captors down into the black market. He stared and stared at that point in the far corner at the back of the room where he knew that secret entrance lay, and they waited as time trickled on around them. Eventually, finally, at long, long last, the hour was up, and one of the blacksmiths raised their heads and nodded towards the pair sitting in the corner, jerking their head towards the entrance into the black market. Erasmus rose at once, Tinny right by his side, and they practically flew into the open archway and down, down, down those stairs. Erasmus faltered as they got halfway down. There were smears of blood running down the stone walls, drips of it on the steps, and what he recognised horribly as scratches from nails, from digging feet, from someone struggling hard against their captors as they were dragged down under the ground. Darrow, he whined from the back of his throat, and he hurried further and further downwards, Tinny rushing along beside him.
We'll find him, Uncle Eerie. We will. I promise.
A small girl's promise into a large, vast world. He wanted to believe her. He knew he would do anything he could to try to make her words come true. But as they ran out of the bottom of the spiral staircase and into that underground, vast cavern of the black market, and he saw that while there were some people around dotted here and there, the place was mostly dark and quiet. He couldn't see anyone struggling, he couldn't see any signs of where Darrow could have been taken. And staring around at the dimly lit place, it began to dawn on him just how tricky it would be to make that promise come true. Tinny was a young girl, but she wasn't a child anymore. She took her uncle's hand and gripped it tight.
Well, we can't just stand here. Let's start. Over there, maybe?
She pointed off to the right-hand side, down a narrow passageway weaving between stalls. It looked the most well-lit. Perhaps it led somewhere. It was as good a place to start as any, so Erasmus nodded, and off they set. And so they wander. They wander for a long time. Another hour nearly rolls by. Erasmus is getting more and more desperate. It's Tinny who spots a flash of white on the ground. Far off in the middle, the very centre of the room almost. She bends and picks it up.
Look, Uncle Erasmus. Isn't that what Darrow was wearing?
She's right. The white is part of the lace mesh, the mask that had twirled up, covering his burn scars and over his throat onto his face. Erasmus holds it tight in his fist as they look around, but there are no more signs of him. It's then that they hear something, a snatch of whispered conversation between two people stood by one of the shops.
Yeah, Lumens. You see him too?
Yeah, not half an hour ago. He looked pissed.
I don't know. I thought he looked happy. Who was it with him?
Well, yeah, a couple of his cronies.
No. The one they was dragging.
I don't know. Didn't get a look at his face. Reckon it's the blunter.
I reckon it's the blunter.
And at once there comes to Erasmus another piece of semblance of a plan. He strides towards the whispering duo, plastering a smile onto his face and looking as confident as he hopes he can appear, remembering all of his training as a royal, as he leans in and says, "No way, you actually saw Lumens? I thought it was just rumour, but you really saw him. He really is back then. That's incredible. Do you think he's caught the blunter?" The gossiping pair's faces both lit up. One of them responded to Erasmus.
You know what? That could be why he's back. Can't imagine no other reason to show his face unless he's victorious from the hunt, can you?
No. Erasmus feels his voice quiver. I suppose That makes sense. Well, I'm going to go and see if I can track down some more gossip about it. Thank you, good sir. And he walked away before he could say anything else. Hurrying around a corner, they looked for other people they could ask, and Erasmus's eyes settled on a group of people sipping beer on a bench nearby, outside a stall that was selling tankards. He walked over, Tinny trotting up behind him and then hanging back. She didn't want to draw too much attention to herself. A child, at any rate, would cause some attention, and she felt that down here perhaps children would pull even more focus. So she hung back, keeping to the shadows, watching and listening closely. The one-time prince managed to strap a look of something akin to excitement on his face. He rustled together his clothes, making them look slightly less formal, very aware that he did look largely out of place here. He decided that his story would be he had stolen them, if anyone asked. He rushed towards the group of people, still trying to look as excited as possible. He clapped his hand down onto the table, staring around at them, bright and beaming. "Have you heard? Lumens is back. Can't believe it myself. Have you guys heard anything?" He looked so perfectly eager, and the news was so perfectly delicious, that they all, in their slightly drunken state, jumped to join in with him. It was, after all, quite a good plan. "Yeah, we've heard," one slurs next to him at his elbow. Another, sitting directly opposite, drains the last of his drink and points the tankard towards Erasmus. "Yep, saw him, didn't we? Well, I think it was him. Some far away down the end of the stalls, I think. Went that way." And he pointed vaguely in a direction that Erasmus took immediate note of. The other member of their group was still sipping on her drink, and she joined in last, saying, "I saw him. He was in the hood, and so were the others with him. I think there was 3. No, 4. No, there was 4, but one of them was being carried. Maybe he was drunk, or maybe he was naughty. What do you think?" Erasmus watched her sway and start to laugh into her drink, and deciding he wouldn't get too much else out of them, he hurried away, beckoning to Tinny. They went immediately down in the direction the man had been pointing, which led round another corner and further out from the centre. Another hour rolled by, but this time they were active, seeking, talking, asking questions. Tinny slipping around behind people to listen in to their conversations, quiet as she was in her beautiful shoes. Erasmus asking, pretending to be thrilled at the news, continuing gossip around and around, encouraging others to share what they knew. Eventually he came across a woman who was running her stall late into the night with her assistant who was about to leave for the evening. He spoke low and earnestly with them both about how exciting it was that Lumens was back and what they thought was happening. The two of them had seen Lumens and his gang. They had been dragging someone behind them. They hadn't managed to see much of the person's face, but they did say they'd seen long blonde hair and kicking legs. Erasmus said nothing, waiting for the other two to put the pieces together for him. They all agreed that Lumens must finally have caught the blunter. And then Erasmus nudged just a little. He asked, "Where do you think he's taking him? The blunter? Is he just going to kill him, or?"
"Oh no," the woman said, sounding for all intents and purposes as light and sweet as a granny. "No, he won't want him dead yet. He's been looking for that blunter a long time. He'll want to take his sweet revenge first."
Erasmus swallowed. "Shame to miss that, don't you think? Would be more fun if he brought the blunter out here and let us all have a go."
"Yeah, but Lumens likes things personal. He'll have taken him down into the depths, won't he?"
"The depths?"
"Yeah, right down the bottom. Past the sewers, past the regular tunnels, past all the hideouts. Right deep down at the bottom. That's where they say the torture chambers are." Good place, too. Imagine knowing that even if you somehow manage to break out, you've still got to fight your way through everyone else, all the way back to the surface. Best kind of prison out there, don't you think?
Again, Erasmus swallowed, and he backed slowly away. Tinny came up to him and tugged on the back of his cloak. They slipped away to speak.
When that man has finished his shift, we need to follow him, Uncle Erasmus. I've been listening to the guy beside him. They were talking about going home and what they were going to have for dinner, and they live under the ground, they said. They live in one of the hideouts. If we follow him, he'll lead us to where the entrance is. And then, if we keep going all the way down, we can find Darrow.
Erasmus was so grateful, so amazed, so thrilled to finally have some semblance of a proper plan that he swept her up immediately and gave her a huge hug. And then, quietly, they stood and watched and waited. The man bid goodbye to the woman he worked for, hugged the man on the stool beside him, and then set off for home. The hideouts. Underground. Erasmus was trying to wrap his head around it. The black market had been one thing, but more? There was more under the ground? How deep could this go? Literally. He had lived in that palace all his life, lived topside, up in the city all his life, and yet he'd never had the foggiest idea. No one had mentioned it, never. Not when he'd slipped out to explore the city, never. It had never even occurred to him that there could be an entire group of people living far below the surface. The man they followed led them without realizing it. He skirted around the outside of the black market, through the centre, and down through a little hatchway just round the back of that store that Erasmus and Darrow had gone into to get their work so many days ago now. Waiting for a moment, looking around carefully, Erasmus and Tinny opened the hatch and slipped down after him. They found themselves in an underground maze of tunnels, some connecting immediately into the sewers. They followed them, clang, clang, clanging footsteps, and then they found ladders, down and down. Occasionally they'd see a wooden sign nailed into the corners, which pointed back the way they'd come. Scrawled into it was a word they could read: market. On and down they went, until they were far, far below the sewers, and instead of metal pipes it became almost a rabbit warren. Erasmus decided that the first criminals to start building this place must have had the aid of some sort of magic users. It would have still taken many, many decades, and it was strangely beautiful to see. There was a mishmash of passages and life, very much like a rabbit warren. They could hear people talking, clattering, cutlery, people bustling backwards and forwards to and fro, and while it wasn't busy, and they kept to themselves as much as they could, it was still teeming with life and obvious signs of life as well. Erasmus supposed that, well, being criminals, typically, they would be awake at night. Perhaps this was their daytime to them. They continued on, further and further down. The only thing they could think of was to get as far as possible, as low as possible. And then, what awaited them, surely, must be... Again, the prince swallowed at the thought. Torture. A chamber for torture. A deep, dark imprisonment far under the earth from which there can be no chance of escape. But there would be a chance this time. He would not leave this place without Darrow in his arms. As the two of them pressed on into the labyrinth of passages, something else was happening. Far, far below the earth and deep, dark down under the ground. In a chamber lit with the fluttering light of only one candle. A figure with long, ragged, pale hair is standing with his toes barely brushing the floor.
His arms hang suspended in chains from the ceiling, and as Darrow draws long, ragged breaths, blood trickles down his lips. And on that joyful note, we have finished this part of the OC story. I am giving you guys something to vote on for part 21 for next time, and here is your options. Basically, all I need to know from you guys is, should we make something happen with Darrow's celestial powers? He has been captured by lumens, presumably tortured quite a lot. He will be in pain, he is bleeding. Something should happen, right? Would you like that to happen? I can go a completely different direction if you would rather not, but I've got this thought that something to do with his celestial powers should happen at around this point. So let me know what you think in the comments down below, and as ever, let me know any of the thoughts and feelings that you guys are having, and I will get back to you very, very soon on, well, this story and other videos, and also, of course, the progress on the turning this into a book. All right, I love you all. Bye-bye.